Okay, thanks for that musical introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to the first plenary session of today, which will focus on how can we manage to move beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. So together with the organizing committee, I would like to thank the speakers who accepted to participate in this session and share with us their thoughts on this, I have to say, important topic that affected us all. I also would like to extend my warm welcome to the individuals who live with dementia who also joined us for this session. So since this is a hybrid session, I would also like to welcome those people who have joined us online as well. So with respect to presenting myself, I'm Charles Scerri, Chairperson of the Malta Dementia Society, and also Vice Chair of Alzheimer Europe. I am a Professor of Neuropharmacology and Dementia Studies at the University of Malta, and as a focal point on dementia, I authored the Malta Dementia Strategy, which was launched in April of 2015. So taking stock of the title of this session, there are a few words that can correctly describe what we all went through in these last couple of years, in particular, our loved ones living with dementia. The COVID pandemic brought about a much dreaded lockdown and restrictions, resulting in an unfortunate increase in the number of symptoms in these individuals and a toll on the mental health well-being of their carers. It also significantly impacted the work of dementia associations all across the globe. Now, the pandemic has eased, fingers crossed, and therefore it's time to look beyond. Lessons were surely learned as we developed new strategies and adapted already existent ones in order to help us cope better. So we will have 4 distinguished speakers who will discuss this topic during this session. We will also have a short intervention by Alessia Rossetti from the Federazione Alzheimer Italia, who is one of the finalists of the anti-stigma award. I would appreciate if you switch off your mobile phone or set it on silent mode. Being a hybrid session, I will take questions from the online platform, but rest assured that if time allows, obviously we take further questions from the floor. So please use the Q&A method that you have in your app. So let's start with the presentation by Alessia Rossetti. Alessia, please. She's from Federazione Alzheimer Italia, again, one of the finalists of the Anti-Stigma Award, which was launched for the first time by Alzheimer Europe this year, and who will be giving us a very short presentation about their initiative titled Non ti scordare di volermi bene, which I translated in a little bit of Italian that I know, don't forget to love me. So Alessia, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor to be one of the 3 finalists of the Alzheimer Europe Anti-Stigma Award. Our anti-stigma initiative took place last year's World Alzheimer's Month and consisted in the launch of the Italian website about dementia-friendly communities and the linked inauguration of the national campaign Don't Forget to Love Me 2021. The aim of these 2 combined initiatives was the same: to raise public awareness, fight the stigma, and involve as many people as possible in becoming dementia friends. The website is a portal where everyone can find information about our dementia-friendly communities and the path needed to join the initiative, but also a place where people can learn more about dementia, with the possibility of carrying out a real but simple training course. The most remarkable aspect is that after the training course, people can check their knowledge, making a final quiz and then getting a certificate that proves one's commitment as a friend. The title of the national campaign instead took inspiration from the song written by Lorenzo Baglioni, the one in profile, a well-known singer and songwriter from Florence who decided to talk about his experience with dementia. Lorenzo Baglioni involved in this project even Paolo Ruffini, the other guy, a famous Italian actor who also had experience with dementia. Together, they sang this song and produced a video for the national campaign. Let me show you a little part of it.
E poi un giorno la mente si aprì come si apre un portone soltanto a metà e cominciarono a uscire alle facce le storie, i cognomi e le età. E se ti guardi abbasso lo sguardo tu non capisci il perché. Ma che importa, io ho solo paura tu possa scordarti di me. Non ti scordare di volermi bene. Oh, non ti scordare di volermi bene. Oh.
Well, I'll be using different channels. Both the website and the national campaign show how people with dementia can still communicate with us, displaying, for example, their emotions and feelings through a non-verbal way, but validating in any case the relationship with their caregivers. Additionally, they want to demonstrate how love and closeness can help to cope with difficult situations, such as the dementia process itself. And lastly, there is another important theme addressed in our anti-stigma campaign, namely that people with dementia can be a vital and active part of our communities and can give us valuable insights on how to shape our cities and countries. The target of our anti-stigma campaign was the entire Italian population. The national campaign Don't Forget to Love Me was presented on TV in various programs and time slots during the 2021 World Alzheimer's Month, reaching millions of people. Also, thanks to our activity on social networks, especially Facebook, we were able to reach nearly 3 million people and gain more than 6 million views of our contents. From September 2021 onwards, our association received many emails and phone calls from people who saw the campaign or visited our website about our dementia-friendly communities, asking for information, psychological support, or social advices. And lastly, 5,000 new people became dementia friends, testifying the great success of our anti-stigma campaign. Here you can find the link to our Italian dementia-friendly website and the link to the YouTube video of our anti-stigma campaign, Don't Forget to Love Me 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just one question. Is the song available on media?
It's on YouTube or in our website www.nontiscordare.org. It's better on YouTube.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a lovely song, by the way. Thank you. So our first main speaker for this session is Bernd Heise, who is a member of the European Working Group of people with dementia. He is married and lives in Munich with his wife. For 34 years, he worked as a development engineer of semiconductor devices in the telecommunications industry until his diagnosis. He is also a member of the advisory board of people living with dementia, founded by the German Alzheimer Association. His favorite hobbies are gardening and computer technology. Bernd Heise was nominated to join the European Working Group of People with Dementia in 2018 by the German Alzheimer Association, and became Vice Chairperson in October of 2020. So Bernd will be speaking about a very interesting topic, how to adapt, how he adapted to the COVID-19 pandemic as a person living with dementia. So please, Bernd.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bernd Heise, as it was already announced. I'm 68 years old, and I live with my wife in Munich, in Germany. I was working as an IT engineer, and I was a chip developer for systems for data transmission systems. Additionally, I was the head of the Works Council in the company. I was proud, very proud, to work in a company that what I deemed is the forefront of new developments. 7 years ago, however, I felt that my job became increasingly difficult. I made more mistakes, and I forgot sometimes essential tasks that I should fulfill. Finally, I sought medical help. It took several months to receive the final diagnosis. It was early onset of Alzheimer's disease. That was in the year 2016. People like me who receive such a diagnosis of Alzheimer's for the first time, they perceive, and I did it as well, perceive this as a catastrophe. The whole life, all the expectations for the future have been turned upside down. People with a diagnosis of early onset dementia will likely retire early. Consequently, they will receive less pension and die probably earlier. However, anyone can develop a dementia. The probability increases with the age. When I received my diagnosis, I got a lot of support from the Munich Alzheimer Society. I got involved there as a person with all my knowledge and needs. In my job as an engineer, I mostly communicated in English. As a result, I was asked to become a member of the European Working Group of People with Dementia. This group met before COVID 4 times a year, mostly in Brussels or Luxembourg. And once a year, we met at the annual conference in a European city. This should enable the exchange of information across national borders. The meetings in diverse groups and levels provided me with more energy, and I gained so much from doing useful work despite the diagnosis. But then the pandemic started. Due to the pandemic, face-to-face meetings were no longer possible. I felt this was a severe drawback. All activities that were important for me and belonged to the non-drug therapies to counteract my Alzheimer's disease, and that should be stopped. I missed the colleagues, and some of the meaningful joint activities such as hiking, running, bicycle tours that were organized by the Munich Alzheimer Society. I also missed social contacts in general. My wife and I had to stay at home, and our life became also more difficult. Luckily, we live in an apartment with a garden. That gave us some more space, and that was very important during the pandemic. Some of my weekly meetings were carried out digitally. Also, exchange meeting with the working group became virtually only. It has been a big change, but all restrictions couldn't stop the communication. The online meetings were mostly short, but much more frequent. They've been held by the support of Anna and Diane, our supporters at the working group. In our virtual meetings within the European Working Group, we met the experts online. They were still very interested in our expertise as people with dementia. Those online meetings lasted typically an hour. The online meetings gave us, however, the possibility to stay in contact, and we could still exchange our views. These new virtual tools have been and are still an effective way to stay in contact. However, I still believe that the online meetings can never fully replace the real meetings with personal contact. And sometimes it has been challenging for people with dementia, like me, to coordinate the meetings for people, meetings without forgetting anything. My knowledge and my experience from my job helped me a lot with the technical challenges, and it was easier for me to adapt quickly. The PC and my mobile phone are part of my daily work. These are tools that stay up to date. We all learned to handle the new tools, and we could maintain the communication online. The pandemic changed everything. Most of my prior activities, which were part of the important treatment, have been suspended. I missed my French classes, which I had begun just before. And of course, I missed the meetings, the personal support at the Munich Alzheimer Society, all the meaningful activities and many other social contacts. At least, however, I could still go running alone. During that time, I've also spent much more time in working in our garden, and I started some gardening projects. I renovated our garden sheds with a new roof, covered it with tar shingles, and painted the wooden wall. I planned and installed an automatic lawn mower that takes care of the grass. The next project is already installed, an automatic irrigation system that works already in a basic mode. The idea is that according to the moisture of the lawn and in the garden, tells the system to irrigate or not. For example, in rain, it's not necessary. It stops it by itself. So I made during that time many new technical issues also related to our apartment, which took a lot of time, but is now a relief for us. We can now be happier because of that. During the later stage of the pandemic, we could do sports outside again. We did long bicycle tours together with my wife, and we went out jogging. I believe that these activities also help to slow down the development of the disease. However, I also feel that are already reaching some limits that not existed before. Forgetfulness is increasing and I'm becoming more insecure. Here I can imagine that the pandemic made things worse. As much of my everyday routine was no longer there, which is a sad side effect for me. I'm glad that I have a technical background, the PC, my mobile, our daily tools, and it keeps me updated. It can show me the way to the next destination by bike, by public transportation. Moreover, it prevents me from getting lost. Techniques gives me also new ideas. During the pandemic, I followed the infection numbers. Believe me or not, it was interesting to watching the development of the pandemic over time and keeping statistics on it. My mantra was and is to stay alive and healthy as long as possible. Therefore, I do some endurance training that should help to delay the progression. And in addition, I'm interested in current political affairs and read a daily newspaper. I'm using my PC also to train my brain. I'm also looking permanently for any challenges that used to be easy earlier and now going to be challenging, but I overcome the problems. Occasionally I need more time and sometimes I may not find the appropriate words and I may get problems with orientation. Nevertheless, I'm still committed to helping people with dementia. I would like to encourage people in the same situation as me to live positively with the disease. But we will not give up. This year we meet at this conference in Bucharest in person and we can maintain personal contact. However, I still believe that it is much better to meet in person, and I'm happy to meet old friends and the new people at the conference. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bernd. Let me remind you that we will take questions at the end, including gardening advice directly from I'm pretty sure it will be very, very helpful. So thanks, Bernd, very much for sharing your personal story during the pandemic.
Okay.
Okay, so our next speaker should have been Professor Gabriel Jon Prada. Unfortunately, he sent us a message this morning that he could not make it, and that will give us some more time for opening the discussion later on and for taking questions. So let me invite our next speaker then, who is Clarissa Giebel from the United Kingdom. Dr. Giebel is senior researcher at the University of Liverpool and the National Institute of Health and Care Research, Applied Research Collaboration, Northwest Coast. She is leading national and international research into health inequalities in dementia social care and mental health, and has led some of the first national and international studies into the impacts of the pandemic on people with dementia and unpaid carers. Dr. Giebel is passionate about public involvement and working with a number of countries to jointly address health inequalities in the care for people with dementia and their caregivers, including India, Australia, Colombia, and the Netherlands. She is the organizer of the public Liverpool Dementia and Aging Research Forum and host of the Aging Scientist podcast. Dr. Giebel will be talking about who cares for the carers, the long-term impact of the pandemic on dementia carers.
Great. Thank you very much. That was a long introduction. Apologies for that. I didn't realize I was reading out all of it. But yes.
Guess to send us very short biography.
Sorry. Right. So, huge thank you for inviting me to give this talk today. And really, it's been a humongous team effort. And it's been an opportunity for me to reflect on what we have achieved actually in the past 2.5 years, not just as researchers, not just the health and social care providers, but we've had a huge deal of unpaid carers and people living with dementia actually supporting us with this research as active team members. So I'm going to give you a little snapshot of what we've done. There's been more, but I hope this will provide a little flavor. And I hope I'm going to manage to use the clicker perfectly. No, I'm not. Is it the green? That one? Okay, lovely. So as you can see, the title is Who Cares for the Carers? We've done a lot of research on people living with dementia, but I think I wanted to use this opportunity to really reflect on what unpaid carers are doing and just they don't get the recognition that they truly deserve. So I hope this research will reflect a little bit on this. So first of all, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the primary research and evidence that we've gathered, more at the beginning of the pandemic, and then I'll talk about a very comprehensive systematic review that we've conducted internationally. So this slide kind of combines a mixed method study on the left. So apologies, you can't see the community properly. But basically, we've conducted research both with people with dementia and unpaid carers residing in the community in April 2020. So we were lucky enough to receive funding very early on. And we've done a mixed method study. We've done baseline interviews with 50 unpaid carers and people living with dementia, really trying to understand what are your experiences now? It's really early on now, but are you accessing care? What is your well-being? Are you accessing care in the community, such as daycare centers, peer support groups, respite care, etc.? Then we followed people up a few months later. We've also done a remote survey over 3 time points from May to August that year to really understand what are your impact on mental health and mental well-being. So we asked them standardized tools on anxiety, depression, quality of life, etc. I'm going to give a bit more methods background here because our care home research, which was building on the community research, was purely qualitatively a few months later, and we wanted to understand, again, the experiences of family carers with people living with dementia in care homes all across the UK, but then we also focused on paid carers, so care home staff. Okay, so we combined that, and then we followed people up a few months later. Maybe just to reflect on here, in the UK, in that time period between October, November 2020 and March 2021, we suddenly had the vaccination rollout, but we also had increased testing in care homes. Okay? So in terms of our community-based research, doing the interviews, the follow-up interviews, and the survey, overall, we found, obviously, people with dementia, reflecting on what Bernd was saying earlier as well, that people were not accessing the care they needed. They were restrained to their home, but that also had a hugely negative impact on the unpaid carers because they had to take on the additional caring roles that normally someone would do if a paid carer comes in or if the person with dementia goes to respite care, daycare center, etc. So again, much more tasks that the unpaid carers had to do. That led to poorer mental well-being, on top of the general anxiety of living through the pandemic as well. But there was no support provided. So when we looked at the survey data across those 3 time points, we found that not accessing social care and social support services in the community for carers was linked to reduced mental health outcomes. So we actually have that link there from the survey. I put a picture here of our policy briefing because I think we as researchers always need to make that next step, and I think Alzheimer's Europe is fantastic in focusing on policy. So we've worked with the Liverpool Heseltine Institute here to try and make some recommendations of how care should be provided, and what Bernd was saying earlier as well. Digital is all good and well, but it's a lifeline, really. There should be face-to-face support. In terms of now moving on to our care home study, and all of this is published as well if you want to read up a little bit more in detail about it. Focusing again on the unpaid carers, the family carers of people with dementia in care homes. From that time period when we first spoke to them towards March, we found increased levels of anger in unpaid carers. So first of all, everyone was really frustrated. I can't see my husband, I can't see my mum in the care home, I'm really agitated and worried about her, I feel guilty. But then people started to become angry because they saw that staff were still going into the care home, even though some were not vaccinated. But all family carers were vaccinated, but they were not allowed in, so they were only able to see someone behind a plastic screen or on the phone or things like that. That's hugely distressing. So again, I'm just trying to paint a picture here of the increased mental health impact that this has had. So that was unpaid carers, but we also spoke to quite a large number of paid carers, care home staff, 16, across the UK, so all from different care homes across the 4 nations, as much as we could distribute. And we found increased levels of carer burnout. Now, you might all be familiar the changes in job role that were people affecting, including increased levels of hours that they were working. There was no training or guidance, at least in the UK. We know in the Netherlands it was a bit easier, but there was no guidance provided, so each care home managed themselves. And that had a huge impact on carers, but we know also that this will have long-term impacts now. We know that prior to the pandemic, staff wasn't well supported, at least in the UK. So now, what are we going to do now? The mental health impacts are just accumulating. And a recent report by the Health Foundation in the UK has also shown that 1/5 of care home staff are actually living in poverty. So because of the really low salary for care home staff and social care staff in general. So there is a link between poverty and mental health, so we all need to put it into perspective. So that was a really quick tour through some of the primary research, and now I want to share with you one of our 2-part systematic review that we've done with a really fantastic international team of PhD students, researchers, but also 2 unpaid carers, Jackie and Hillary, who've been part of this, but also René might be in the room from Germany, he might not be, but he's at the conference as well. So it was a really big team effort and everyone's pulled through there. So all of us have done primary research on how is the pandemic impacting on people with dementia and unpaid carers. So now we wanted to see, okay, let's compare this globally, let's pull this all together. So we went a bit ambitious and just wanted to generally check what's the impact on health and mental health, cognition, and social care access and usage. Well, that was a bit ambitious because we generated about 10,000 records. Yeah. All of them were screened by 2 different people, so everyone was pulling through. But then we had 159 full texts to read, and we included 53 papers, which were actually 46 studies. Okay, we didn't really want to exclude anything, so what we did was we split this into one focusing on the outcomes and impacts on people living with dementia, and one focusing on the outcomes on unpaid carers. So both of them have just recently been published as well. So I'm just going to talk about the unpaid carers review now and some of the key highlights. But as you can see here as well, there really has been quite a widespread of studies conducted across the globe. So we've included research from over 15 countries, including some low and middle income countries, and we found a few differences there as well. In terms of the types of included studies, there was a mix of survey, a mix of quantitative and purely qualitative research, and we tried to narratively combine this. Okay? So there we go. So just focusing on unpaid carers. We had, across all of those studies that were included, so it was 33 studies, I think, yes, if I remember correctly, studies included. All of them reported negative impact on access to care when they looked at access to care. All of them reported negative impact on carer burden when they looked at it, and 28 studies looked at carer burden alone. All of them reported negative impacts on mental health and well-being, if they reported that, and 26 studies looked at mental health and well-being. Now, just to look at the types of studies, as I mentioned, there were some mixed, some quant, some qual. If we're looking at the quantitative ones, it's interesting. Some of them actually were in the unique position to have, for example, carer burden data. I know it's a term not everyone likes, but it's a tool that's called carer burden, so carer stress. Some of them have looked at carer burden and stress prior to the pandemic, just on a normal study, and then they were in the unique position to then look at that again a few months later, and they noticed deteriorations in that, or, well, higher levels of burden. Some of them have looked at levels of anxiety, depression, for example, with the GAT-7 or PHQ-9 or other measures, and they were also reporting this in increases in poorer mental health prior to. Some studies looked at it just after the pandemic and looked at a different time point, but generally this shows that across all the countries there was no exception. Everyone looked at this and found negative impacts. Yes, and I think we need to, and this is a follow-on study, but just to kind of put that into perspective, this is still going on. This will have long-lasting implications and impacts on unpaid carers, so there really needs to be much better support provided. And I don't know if some of you UK-based researchers or people with dementia know Tide, the charity. So it's a charity to really support unpaid carers that I'm working with, and we are working with at Liverpool really closely. And they've done a lot on this work as well. And there's a Rights for Residents group, some of you might know as well, who are really advocating for their loved ones in care homes. So following on from that, because the talk was about the long-term impacts and what's happening now, this is what we've done at Liverpool together with our national and international collaborators. We're working on other studies as well, but one study I wanted to highlight here, I was hoping I'd have some data to share, but we're still collecting data, so bear with us, is on the unmet mental health needs of paid and unpaid carers. It's funded by the NIHR. We've conducted 32 interviews already, all remotely. Majority of those were with unpaid carers, because some of you may know it's quite difficult now to get a hold of care home staff and paid home carers to talk to, because they're very busy, obviously, with their job. But we already have the same kind of findings in terms of people are really struggling with their mental health, but now we want to understand, how do you access mental health support? Is your manager supportive in your care home or in your service? Or if you wanted to access it, do you know where to go to, who to talk to? Because the aim of this study is really to develop some supportive and easily accessible mental health intervention. And then just to kind of summarize from all the research that we've done so far, and from the systematic review that people have globally done, that people have faced increased caring duties, and this is not really going down. I know from talking to a lot of our charities that we're working with, yes, they're providing face-to-face support again, but still sometimes it's remotely, and we haven't even looked at healthcare support, and accessing GPs is still really difficult, for example. There's exacerbated lack of support for care staff, both in care homes and home care workers. We can't neglect them. They're really vital to provide that care. And dealing with loss, people have unfortunately passed away in care homes and at home, and that's really difficult to deal with, not only in a pandemic setting, but generally. So how can carers be supported? Yeah, and really there needs to be ongoing support for mental health, which is too often neglected. So our next step is trying to secure some more funding to really build on our original work that we've started at the beginning of the pandemic, and really try and see, can we follow up with carers and their changing needs, and what are their priorities now. And that's it for me, but a really big thank you. This is not me, this is all the charities that we work with, this is all the people with dementia and carers that are our team members, and obviously our participants and care professionals. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Clarissa. Very interesting perspective there. I'm pretty sure the audience would have some questions about it and some comments as well, because it's something that we saw all across all across Europe, all across the world actually, the stories of caregivers and their well-being. And we often forget also that caregivers were not only the unpaid caregivers who went through some mental health issues, but also the paid ones, the people that actually care formally for these individuals. They also suffered a lot and went through a lot during the pandemic. So thank you very much, Clarissa. So our last speaker is Bridget Jurazovic from Austria. Bridget is a senior health expert at the Austrian Public Health Institute, Department of Long-Term Care. She has been working for years on the topics of long-term care and support, structural planning, personal forecasts, process control, and outcome-oriented problem and structure analysis. She was responsible for the development of the dementia strategy, Good Leben mit Demenz, Living Well with Dementia in 2015, and has also been responsible for the coordinating of its implementation since 2016 with her team on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Social Affairs, Healthcare and Consumer Protection. She will be talking us about implementing the Austrian dementia strategy during the COVID pandemic.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. And thank you also for the invitation to this great conference, and thank you very much for the incentives and all the inspiration I had yesterday. Oh, you don't have, it's good, thank you. So thank you for all the inspiration and incentives I had yesterday at this great conference, and I will have obviously tomorrow. First, I will just say a few words to the background of our strategy. We developed it, as you said, in 2015, and it describes 7 objectives and over 20 recommendations how to reach these objectives. And the main focus in that year was on dementia as a public health priority, because these were new issues and new things also for policymakers in Austria. During the first 5 years, the focus were on networking, participation and involvement of people affected by dementias and their family, and on raising awareness of the public, but also of the policymakers. In 2020, a new period should begin. The government decided to spend more money to develop and implement concrete actions to reach the objectives of our strategy. But then, as Bernd told before, the pandemic changed everything. And instead of developing an action plan with new funds, the question was how the work can be continued during the pandemic. So I want now describe why networking is important in Austria and what we did during the past 2 years to continue networking and the work together. In Austria, the legal responsibility for the care system is divided between the federal state, the 9 federal countries, and the social security. So it's very difficult for persons affected by dementia and for their informal carers to reach the right support they need at the right time. A platform was established with a working group, a kind of steering committee, to bring all these responsible stakeholders, all the policymakers of these 3 of these 3 public authorities together to promote the implementation of the strategy. And furthermore, with an annual conference, we bring together all other stakeholders. That means experts, people working in nursing homes or home services or hospitals, experts from university, and also people affected by dementia. And the work of these past years was crucial for the necessary rapid information transfer and for establishing new forms of communication during the pandemic. And we concentrated on online tools to bring the necessary information quickly to the people. The main effect of our platform was that we could exchange those experiences and encourage people and organizations to try new things. So, for example, it was very effective to exchange the good experience with online support groups and online cafes, not only for the informal carers, but also for the people with the dementia. And also our annual conference was organized online in autumn 2020 with a focus on exchanging experiences. And we had about 100 people took part on 4 different online talks. Main focus laid on the participation of people affected by cognitive disorders of living with dementia. And we learned that digital media and online support worked surprisingly well. We heard it before from the 2 speakers before. And we got the response, especially from people affected, that the new media leads to a gain in experience and education. And it helps to remain curious and even to become curious about new things. So, as you told us before, and it broadens the horizon of people with dementia, of their carers, and also of professionals. Another very good effect was that people of different regions in Austria could meet online. Because when we have our meetings in Vienna, it's not possible to meet with all the peoples, especially with dementia, for example, in Vienna. But however, digital options are not appropriate for every person with dementia, and so we have to think about how can we reach them and how can we also collect their opinions and their needs. But we will continue with the online meetings and with the online media. But what was very important, we heard it before, that the pandemic brought a new discussion, especially on the things that it is necessary to discuss about protection of general health on the one hand and individual freedom on the other hand. And this also means that we have to discuss the underlying concept of health. What is health? Is it the absence of a disease, or is it more? Is it a kind of a psychosocial picture, and what means this to the support for people with dementia and their informal carers in the next time? We saw, and we heard it also before, that the lack of social contacts increases the cognitive impairments, increases loneliness and social isolation, and so the support of families, of informal carers is very important, and so it is very important to increase and to extend the mobile home services, but also to increase psychological and psychosocial support that must be offered for the families. And also here a new discussion started. What means a relative? What means an informal carer? Does this really require a family relationship, or is it rather a question of the status as an important reference person? And so we have to discuss this also with the policymakers, because in Austria this is very important for some rights. For example, we have a care leave and care leave fundings, and this is only for relatives and not for other informal carers. Or we have free social insurances for informal carers, also restricted for family members. And this discussion has to be held in the next years. And the most important learning we had, that it is more important than ever to include people with dementia in the policy-making processes. And of course, dementia and long COVID will be a new issue in the next years. And these learnings let us focus more on a stronger participation and involvement of people affected, and to build, as the theme of this conference is, to build bridges between the public, the decision makers, and the people affected. In last year, we established a federal working group of self-representatives, as it is shown also in Alzheimer Europe, and Angela, who is Mitglied at Alzheimer Europe Working Group, is also a member of our working group, and most of the people come from the support groups, and their aim is to make people with dementia visible in Austria and to bring their needs and opinions into the public. And in the first meeting, the group defined their objectives, and the working program is always defined at the beginning of each year, and you can see here the objectives the people of the working group defined themselves and they want to achieve within the next years. Working program of this year is that we work on a brochure of people with dementia, for people with dementia, focusing on 3 topics. What are the first signs of cognitive disorder, who can help, and how can I receive a diagnosis, and what helps me in everyday life, and we hope that we will finish this brochure at the beginning of the next year. And as I said before, one very main objective is to make people with dementia visible and to bring their needs and opinions into the public, and so we also established a kind of trialogue forums. So people with dementia, their informal caregivers and different partners meet for a special theme or issue. And last year we had such a forum with media and press, and this year a second one with representatives of dementia-friendly communities. And these trialogue forums are not only an instrument to increase participation, but also an important measure to raise awareness of the different partners. So especially the press and media seems to be very important, because in most newspaper reports or in films, very often a very negative image of people with dementia is conveyed. So dementia is portrayed very often as a burden, as a suffering, and the focus of the images is on people with a very severe dementia. And together with experts, we developed a guideline. Also with our working group, we developed a guideline for press and media and discussed this guideline in a workshops with journalists. And it was really very impressive to see how the opinions of the journalists changed when discussing with people with dementia, and when they heard what they need and how they can live their life in a very good and in a very qualitative high way. And as a result, we saw a change in reporting with more sensitive and respectful coverage of people with dementia. And it was not only reported about the people, but there were interviews with the people and a report of their lives. And we are very proud that one of these TV reports just last week won an award for well-founded reporting on mental and cognitive impairments. So this was the success, especially of our working group. We also funded a photo gallery with pictures of affected people, free to download, so that positive and strong pictures are shown in the media. And here you can see an example of a campaign that shows that dementia is invisible. It means this blue, eine von beiden hat Demenz, one of these two has dementia. We also have some leaflets in different languages, especially for the informal carers and for the carers from other countries. And what we are planning in the next year, we hope that we can develop the action plan as planned in 2020, and we hope that we get some additional fundings, but we hope, we don't know, because of the pandemic and also of the war now, it's really not sure that additional fundings are for the dementia strategy. But one focus of the next year's programs lies on developing a plan, a national awareness campaign like we saw in Italy. And we would, of course, take international examples like your campaign or the Dementia Friends in Scotland or Belgian campaigns or also the Dementia Partner in Germany. And the second focus will be on primary care and awareness rising of the family doctors. Yeah, but I think we need additional financial funding to can go further and to living well with dementia also in the next year. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Brigitte, for giving us a perspective coming from your country about the challenges that you faced during the implementation process during COVID. We faced, as a country, as other countries as well, we faced almost the same challenges. Now, I don't have any questions on the online platform, so I'm going to open the questions from, or comments that you have from the floor. But first, I want to invite the speakers to join me here. Yeah, you can join us as well because we love your song anyway. So I'm seeing some hands raised. Please make sure that you use the microphone because otherwise the people who are online cannot follow the question. They will hear the answer, but they cannot follow the question. So yes, please introduce yourself first and.
Thank you. My name is Nis Peter Nissen and I'm director of the Danish Alzheimer Association. And thank you for the presentations and the speech by Bernd Heise. It was interesting and also promising that we could learn from this pandemic many inspirations to work with in the countries we come from. But I have one comment about the pandemic. If you look at it, you can see all over Europe that the worst hit group of patients far to anyone else was patients with dementia. That was the case in rich countries like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland. That was the case in any other country. In Denmark, for example, every fourth, 25% of every patient with dementia that got infected by corona died. That is twice as many as any other cancer, heart disease, lung disease, whatever. And the most devastating thing is that that was not surprising. If you look at the factors behind, we knew all of them before the pandemic. People with cognitive impairment are less likely to understand the advice how to avoid infections. Because of the disease, they get more infections because they cannot ask for help. They don't get the help, they don't get the medicine. And even also the healthcare system didn't prioritize people with dementia. And the thing is that during the pandemic, we saw it even more. And the worst thing is that if we don't change, it will still continue after the pandemic. I call it the silent, non-recognized pandemic of dementia. So we have to convince the healthcare system to take much more care and prioritize people with dementia. In Denmark, for example, for every person above 80 years, the biggest cause of healthcare deficit, what you call in daily, is people with dementia. So we need to convince the healthcare system to focus much more on people, frail patients with dementia. And that's my plea to everyone here. We have to focus on the healthcare system, because if we don't, we will see new pandemics causing new big problems for people with dementia and their carriers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You just gave a summary of what actually happened and what we saw with our. We will be discussing this topic even further tomorrow, Wednesday, in the last plenary session as well. So please do join us. We would love to hear your comments as well. Do we have any comments about that? Yes? And switch on the.
Okay, hope it's on now. Yes. Thank you for that. Completely agree, but I think there needs to be a much better focus on the link between social care service as well. I know it might be different in different countries, but at least in the UK we have health and social care, and usually social care is completely neglected, unfortunately, underfunded, etc. But just to pick up on that as well, some of our research from the community also looked at how unpaid carers face these really difficult decisions in terms of, am I going to continue having a paid home carer come into my home or into my relative's home and provide that really necessary support with everyday activities? Whereas I don't even know, are they vaccinated? Are they using protection, etc.? And sometimes we know, unfortunately, if someone with dementia is in the more advanced stages at home, they can have up to 10 different care staff a week coming in. That will just increase the likelihood of it. So it's also kind of the social care system angle as well.
Okay, before I come to the floor, because I have a question online here, and this is addressed to all speakers. And the question is, what measures introduced during COVID should be kept after COVID? So what do you think about these? You mentioned one, the online platform that was so effective, I have to say, in many countries, including my countries, where most people, the only way that they could reach their loved ones with dementia, especially in residential care, was through online chat programs, and it worked beautifully, so much so that we put it as a priority in our implementation of the strategy. The need to focus more on online technology. We thought it won't help, but we were wrong, completely wrong. So any more comments about that?
Well, also from discussions with our charities and caregivers and people with dementia, yes, digital should remain, but we need to be mindful that maybe the system will then think, let's just provide it all remotely, it's so much cheaper. So there really needs to be that equal balance of face-to-face with the opportunity of digital remote access to reach those more rural areas as well, in particularly.
Okay, more questions from the floor, please. I see at least a number of hands.
Thank you, Charles. Chris Lynch from Alzheimer's Disease International. Just a very quick follow-up point on what Nice was saying. We've been working for the last 24 months with WHO on future pandemic preparedness based on this disproportionate impacts that Nice talks about for people living with dementia. And some of those statistics that he was quoting, when you start to look at them globally, particularly places like Australia, Canada, we're looking at up to 42% of all COVID-related deaths with people with dementia. But a very specific ask from me today, and Lewis Arthurton from ADI is here as well. We are trying to put together a more robust case to have dementia specifically included in the pandemic future preparedness response from WHO. If you feel like your government or your association wants to become a bit more involved in that, will you come and speak to us over the next 2 days? And we would really like to leverage your thoughts into that process as well. Thank you.
We have a question from there, please.
Morning. Thanks for those presentations. I have a question for Clarissa because your presentation brought back memories to me. In March 2020, I was on a visit to Liverpool in elderly care, and I came back with corona. While you were starting your research, I spent 17 days in intensive care. What that learned me once coming out of coma was that there are also positive effects on the crisis and informal care. My daughter sent around a newsletter 2 or 3 times a week with updates to like 100 friends and colleagues, former colleagues. I've been told we've never had so many flowers at home at that time. A former colleague who we hadn't seen for 25 years with a very busy job called my partner and said, shall I do the shopping for you? The broadening of that network was fabulous, and we still enjoy some of that renewed contacts that were weakened through busy lives. Have you seen, you're focusing your research, or what you presented, focused on negative effects, stress, burnout. Have you seen any positive effects mentioned?
Good point, and sorry we missed each other in Liverpool back then. There were some positives, although really limited, but the community aspect was there. So what we had in England or the UK was also the food parcels, for example. So if particularly people with dementia, they weren't classed as vulnerable, so they didn't have the priority shopping slots, for example, to supermarkets, which was a really big difficulty. So the community, the charities came together and did the shopping for some of the people living with dementia and carers who could not leave the house because they had to provide care for their relative at home. So there was some increased engagement, and as you said, more carers were setting up WhatsApp groups, and care home staff, I know, did do that as well. So there was some increased engagement, but on the whole, it was rather negative, the experiences.
Hello, my name's Karen Taylor. I'm a family member, but also help run a not-for-profit, which is run by people with dementia in Scotland. It's really a follow-on from the last question, really. I'm wondering if this happened across Europe. Certainly in Scotland and parts of England and Wales, what we found was that the epidemic was an opportunity, especially for people with early dementia and young onset dementia, to find their voice as peers. And through the online community, that led to lots of peers meeting and realising that they could do these things themselves. They didn't need care workers or whatever. And they ran art classes, they ran music sessions, they ran all kinds of things. We developed peer support training. The National Lottery gave us money to help us develop all kinds of dementia programs, including online training. We started a dementia radio station, but during COVID, that took off much better, and that's now run by a person with dementia who's paid. And I just think it's really important that although we absolutely state what happened to a lot of people was absolutely appalling, I think for many, this is a big opportunity to say, hang on a minute, peer support, and actually people running their own services and running their own sort of what they want to do really came to a fore, and we mustn't lose that. I think post-COVID, must understand that there's a growing number of people now, particularly the younger people with dementia, who can and do have the skills to develop a lot of different projects themselves.
Do you have any comments on that? Yeah, I have a question actually online, and the person is asking, should we keep better testing of relatives and staff going into homes to detect any signs of illness, like COVID and the upcoming flu, for example?
I seem to be the only one responding. Sorry about that. I'm not hogging the mic. I was asking. I think so, but what I also notice is in the UK, the restrictions are completely ceased. No one is wearing a face mask anymore. I do still on public transport or in the supermarket. I try as much as I can, but I think there's an attitude approach as well. Like some people might not adhere to it anymore if it's not imposed by the government more widely, but it's a good thing to do, yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to do as well, because we noticed that because of all the face protection and all the things that we've done, the rate of flu cases was reduced drastically. And also mortality due to flu was also reduced significantly. So what was good in terms of protecting ourselves to COVID is also good in protecting ourselves to other conditions that may cause morbidity and mortality in the elderly general population in mostly. So there might be some thought about that as well. I have a question from here, please. If you can hand in the microphone. Yeah. And that will be the last question because we have a video to show you as well.
Good morning. I am Tsatali Mariana and I work in Greek Alzheimer Association as a psychologist. During the quarantine, we delivered some supportive digitalized interventions in caregivers, and we conducted a research in order to measure their experience. We found some unpredictable results, and one of them is that not all caregivers were affected at the same level, irrespectively of whether they participated in our groups or not. A significant factor mentioned by the caregivers about whether they had a negative experience during the quarantine is whether their person living with dementia was deteriorated. So those who mentioned that there was such kind of deterioration of their person living with dementia were more negatively affected. So it's really significant after 2 years experience of all this COVID situation to focus on specific risk factors and deliver specific interventions because not all of them are affected at the same level. I don't know if you have any experience on that or any comment to add. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. You'll be sick of my voice by the end of this. Yes, this is something that came out in our primary research and in the systematic reviews as well, particularly with the more advanced stages of dementia. But I think also one point to highlight is the different subtypes of dementia. So we noticed, for example, that people with more rarer types of dementia, such as Lewy bodies, PCA, or behavioral variant frontotemporal, for example, they have different symptomatologies compared to Alzheimer's disease dementia. And specifically when we look at how people look at a screen with Zoom boxes, for example, some people with dementia, with rarer types, have vision deficits or attention deficits as well at some point. So it's not one size fits all, so yeah.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Thank you for all your interventions as well. It helped us a lot. So that brings us to the end of this session. I hope it was informative and enjoyable. Again, I would like to thank the speakers for the participation. But before we break for coffee, I need to remind you about a special symposium that is going to be held tomorrow, which unfortunately you don't have a lot of information on the program. It is a symposium organized by Alzheimer Netherlands, and it will be held tomorrow, Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and in Salon A. It will be discussing warm technology and dementia. So before we go for coffee, I know that you need some coffee now, some caffeine there in your system. We will need to show you a video whose the main actor is Bernd. So it's a video about you, Bernd.
My name is Bernd, and I'm living with Alzheimer's. As a person, I'm the same person. By profession, I was an engineer for data transmission systems. Besides the normal things like walking and running, I have a hobby doing digital things at the computer. The latest invention is to have this irrigation system. The goal is to make it more automatic. I'm pretty sure there is already a patent available.
Mein Name ist Hilde Eickhoff und ich bin die Ehefrau von Bernd Heise. Also das Technische, das hat er immer noch drauf, das ist unglaublich. Er braucht unheimlich lange, aber er kriegt alles noch mal hin. Er hat vor kurzem ist unser Internet zusammengebrochen und er hat so lange rumgewerkelt, bis er das wieder hingekriegt hat. Das ist unglaublich.
I think That's the most important thing, to keep oneself active and to the stimulation of the brain and with different tasks, different ideas and trying new things. This is much more helping oneself. I try to be as much as I was, but compared to the past where I was more an engineer and very attached to technical solutions, that has now changed a bit more in the direction to deal with people and talk to people, learn from other people, not doing everything by my own as I did it in the past. With the Alzheimer Society, got a lot of new friends and somehow I appreciate that.
Viel gereist und Fahrrad gefahren, Fahrradtouren und mit Freunden auch. Wir haben auch viel mit Freunden unternommen. Also ich muss sagen, wir haben noch eine schöne Zeit gehabt. Oder haben wir noch immer. Wir haben jetzt eigentlich nichts vermisst. So.
You have to carry on and just try to live the life as good and enjoyable as possible. But I change and I will stay me.